Endocrine system controlling blood glucose. Cells in the human body can only survive within narrow physical and chemical limits. They require a constant temperature and pH, as well as a constant supply of food and water. In order to do this, the body requires control systems that constantly monitor and adjust the composition of the blood and tissues to keep it within these set limits. The regulation or control of internal conditions in a cell or organism is called homeostasis. There are many physiological variables in the body that have optimum or ideal values. For instance, our core body temperature needs to be kept as constant as possible to maintain our health. Other conditions or variables that need to be controlled include oxygen and water levels. Let's consider the fluctuations in these physiological variables in a graph. If one of these variables begins to rise, the body tries to return it back to the ideal level. The same is true if the levels fall. There is usually a range either side of the optimum considered normal, and it's this which allows the body to remain healthy and work efficiently. Our core body temperature is maintained within approximately 36.5 and 37.5 degrees Celsius. Your body is constantly detecting changes in these levels and coordinating responses that maintain the balance or homeostasis in your body. When levels go beyond this normal range, processes do not work efficiently or stop, and the body can get damaged. But it's not just our body temperature, oxygen and water levels that need to be maintained within an ideal range. So does our blood glucose concentration. Glucose is a sugar, and it is needed for respiration. It is therefore an extremely important molecule. Levels of glucose fluctuate throughout the day, but are kept within a certain range. If levels of blood glucose fall too low, there is a risk our organs will stop functioning properly. However, it can be harmful to the body if levels of it get too high. So the body must make sure that blood glucose levels are constantly monitored and controlled to keep it within the normal range. But what systems does the body have to enable this to happen? Well, our glucose levels are monitored and controlled by the pancreas, an organ that is part of the digestive system and the endocrine system. The pancreas produces and secretes two hormones, one being insulin, which helps to lower our blood glucose concentration if it is rising above the ideal or normal range. The other hormone produced is glucagon, and this is involved in raising our level of blood glucose if it falls below the ideal or normal range. Glucagon and insulin work together to control our blood glucose by a mechanism called negative feedback. Negative feedback can be described as a control mechanism that detects a change in a particular internal condition, either above or below the normal range, and brings about a response to return the condition to its normal range. This basically means that the body will detect a change in an internal condition, such as temperature or pH, and bring about a response that opposes or is opposite to that change, in order that that condition returns to within its normal range. Let's look at how this can occur using a simple model. This is a model of a negative feedback loop. The stimulus represents a change in the internal environment, which is then detected by a receptor. This is processed by a coordination center, such as the nervous system or endocrine system, which then causes an effector to create the response that is opposite to the stimulus, returning the condition back to normal and essentially turning off the original stimulus. The fact that it is a cycle shows that the process is continuous. As soon as the stimulus is received again, the negative feedback process begins again. We can use this model to show exactly how glucagon and insulin interact to control blood glucose continuously in the body. Let's start with the stimulus, which in this case will be blood glucose concentration rising above the normal range. This happens after you eat a meal or have a sugary drink, for example. Now, this is detected by the receptor, which in this case will be the pancreas. This is then processed by the coordination center, which again is the pancreas. And the pancreas will then release insulin into the blood. Now, the insulin acts on the effectors, which in this case are the liver and muscle cells, which take up more glucose and convert it to glycogen. This leads to a response, where the blood glucose concentration decreases. Now, this is opposite to the original stimulus, which was the blood glucose concentration rising or increasing. This is the negative feedback and results in the normal blood glucose concentration returning towards the normal range. But this negative feedback doesn't just involve the original stimulus being reversed or opposed. To ensure insulin doesn't continue lowering the blood glucose concentration, insulin release is reduced, allowing blood glucose concentration to be maintained within its normal range until you eat a meal or have a snack again. And then the stimulus is received again and the negative feedback cycle repeats. But what if the stimulus, this time, is the blood glucose concentration falling below the normal range? Perhaps because you've been exercising for a very long time or you've skipped a meal. Well, again, this is detected by the receptor, which is the pancreas. The pancreas, as we know, is also the coordination center, which releases glucagon into the blood this time. Glucagon then acts on the effector, which in this case is the liver, and the liver cells break down the glycogen to glucose, which is then released into the blood. The response to this is the blood glucose concentration increases this time, which is opposite or reverse of the original stimulus. And normal blood glucose concentration starts to return towards the normal range. As we saw with insulin, the negative feedback here also involves glucagon release being reduced to prevent too much glucose being released into the blood and causing the blood glucose level to increase too much. However, the release or secretion will be increased if perhaps you exercise for a long time again or perhaps you skip a meal again, and this allows the stimulus to be detected again. Both glucagon and insulin will interact continuously to keep blood glucose levels at or within its ideal or normal range. Let's summarize what we have learnt. Glucose is a sugar that is needed for respiration. It is therefore an extremely important molecule. Our blood glucose concentration is monitored and controlled by the pancreas as part of homeostasis. The pancreas produces and releases two hormones that can help regulate our blood glucose concentration, insulin and glucagon. Insulin helps to lower our blood glucose concentration. Glucagon helps to raise our blood glucose concentration. Glucagon interacts with insulin in a negative feedback cycle to control blood glucose concentration in the body. Keywords: coordination center, organs of the body that coordinate responses to changes in the internal and external environment. Effector, an organ which brings about a response that restores optimum levels. Glucagon, hormone produced and secreted by the pancreas. It raises blood glucose concentration. Glucose, a type of sugar. It is a store of chemical energy. Glycogen, large insoluble carbohydrate made up of glucose molecules. Homeostasis, regulation of internal conditions of an organism. Insulin, hormone produced and secreted by the pancreas. It lowers blood glucose concentration. Negative feedback, a control mechanism that detects a change in an internal condition and brings about a response to return the condition to its normal range. Optimum, the best conditions possible, leading to a favorable outcome. Receptor, specialized cells that can detect changes in the internal or external environment. Stimulus, a change in the environment that the body responds to.